Jonah, if you could let me know when we're live on YouTube, I would appreciate it. We got to start questioning what really matters. And for me, hi, YouTube. Okay. Welcome, YouTube. Thank you, Jonah. I appreciate you. YouTube, welcome to the Lurie Daniel Favors Show here on SiriusXM's Urban View. We're talking powers and becomes action. We're inviting you in to join our conversation that we're having here on Urban View, where we're talking about intelligence. And the reason that I think it's important for us to talk about intelligence is because when we are talking about decisions that have to be made, when we're talking about societies that have to be built, we're talking about reimagining things. You don't want the dumb doing that. Now, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with dumb people, just that you can be dumb. You should have responsibilities that are commensurate with your levels of intelligence. Now, this is going to feel a little elitist, perhaps, but it's not designed to be, because everyone can be more intelligent. Intelligence is not something that is the province of just one group of people. I believe in a growth mindset. And even if you don't have the greatest level of intelligence right now, that can change, right? You're not stuck. People who don't have great amounts of intelligence are not stuck. They're not required to stay uneducated. You can change that. And so this isn't like, say, class stratification, where if you're born poor, chances are you're going to die poor. or if you're born poor, your children are born into poverty, chances are their ability to navigate out of poverty are not going to necessarily be as easy as somebody who's born into wealth. These are things that matter because, intelligence is it plays a big role in how our society is formulated. Why are we having this conversation today? We're having this conversation today because I think that we have failed as a society to appreciate intelligence the way that we should. And I want to explore what that has done, because it has done some real things in terms of shaping outcomes. Now, this is not about laughing at P, his own mama say he's trash, and possibly a murderer, allegedly, Heck said. It's not about that. It's not about laughing about the fact that Donald Trump stay asleep. And the reason that I think he's actually afraid of being woke is because he can't stay woke, because he is asleep everywhere. He's asleep at the bathroom. He's asleep at the press conference. He's asleep at the meetings. He's always sleeping. And I don't know if I don't know what, this is not about teasing people or creating a situation where we can't have honest dialogue. It's about really, it's about people who, quite frankly, aren't doing so well. They're not doing so well. This is a conversation that begins with a reminder that I had the other day about the fact that a few years ago, there were these studies that came out. And these studies that came out basically were designed to look at connections between intelligence and racism, right? Or intelligence and bias, to be more specific. And these studies that came out essentially demonstrated that when you are someone who has low level intelligence at an early age, chances are when you become an adult, you're going to be more racist. Now, it doesn't mean that only racist people, it doesn't mean that only dumb people are racist. It just means that there are some correlations between your intelligence or the lack thereof, and the racism. Let me explain a little bit, because this has a lot to do with all the policy decisions that we're seeing right now. Back in 2012, between 2012 and 2014, there were a number of studies that basically, and frankly, there's no easy way to put this. Basically, if you are a person who gives into racism and prejudice, you're probably dumber than other people. I didn't say it, the study said it, and this has policy implications, so I want us to explore this a little bit. The research found that children with low intelligence, this is according to a report in NBC News, children with low intelligence are more likely to hold prejudiced attitudes as adults. And the article goes on to say that these findings point to a vicious cycle. According to the lead researcher, whose name was Gordon Hodson, a psychologist at Brock University in Ontario, the researcher found that, quote, low intelligence adults tend to navigate towards socially conservative ideologies. Those ideologies in turn stress hierarchy, and they also stress being resistant to change. When you are a part of this sort of community and you have low intelligence and you're a part of a socially conservative community, that community also tells you to fear change. It tells you to not be woke. It tells you that what you know is all you need to know, because the things that they know, they're just trying to tease you, or they're just trying to manipulate you. They're trying to take advantage of you. And so it becomes a cycle where you have low intelligence, you gravitate towards more social conservatism, and the social conservative space, it tells you don't change, don't worry about going to college, only the woke go to college, and we're not woke, we're asleep. And as a result, you stay stupid. You stay stupid. Now, political polling data and social and political science research, the article continues, do show that prejudice is more in common in those who happen to also hold right-wing ideals. And earlier studies, the report goes on to say, have found links between low levels of education and higher levels of prejudice. So studying intelligence seems like a logical next step. The researchers used two basic studies for the formation of this perspective. The first was a study that followed children who had been born in March of 1958, and it followed them throughout their lives. And another study did the same thing for children who were born in April of 1970. And the children in each of these studies had their levels of intelligence measured at a variety of different ages, between like 10 and 11, so pre-adolescence, later on when they were in their 20s and 30s. And at the same time, their levels of social conservatism and racism were also measured. Now, the article goes on to discuss a whole host of the sorts of tools that they were using, how the study came together. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, you should definitely check it out. But they essentially determined that low intelligence in childhood corresponds with greater levels of racism in adulthood. Now, I did not say this. I know y'all think I'm being hyperbolic, but the research said this. Now, here's the thing. The factor that explains the relationship between these two variables was political, says the article. Quote, when researchers included social conservatism in the analysis, those ideologies accounted for much of the link between brain capacity and bias, which means that people with lower cognitive abilities also, it doesn't mean this, but one of the things they also found was that people with lower cognitive abilities also had less contact with people of other races, which means that there was some consistency here with recent research that demonstrated that intergroup contact is mentally challenging. So when you are already of low levels of intelligence, you hold very socially conservative views that tell you to fear the other, you're probably going to live in a very homogenous community. You're not going to live in a very diverse community, because what we have found through the research is that when you live in a more diverse community, your biases tend to differ. They tend to drop a bit. It doesn't mean that if you're living in a diverse community, you're not racist. It just means that exposure to people of other cultures, other backgrounds, other communities as an effect of opening your brain a little bit. You learn a little bit more. So the question I want to ask today is you racist, or is you stupid, or is you both? And this matters not just because I want to have a hyperbolic conversation about stupid people and racism, but because this has implications for broader society. Let's talk about Florida. Specifically, let's talk about Florida's Congressman Byron Donalds and his wife, Erica Donalds. Now, Byron, you may recall, is a black congressman. He's a black Republican. He's of the fame where he was telling, the whole world that black families did better under Jim Crow. Real foolish type stuff that only the stupid would believe, right? Only the uneducated would believe. Aside from the fact that we weren't even able to determine measurements for marriage length, particularly for black communities prior to like the 1960s, aside from the fact that he had no studies to cite to support this whatsoever. There was the whole reality that we know, the history of Jim Crow, where there was lynchings, there was destructions, there was Black Wall Streets being burned down. So we knew that Byron was not the brightest of the brightest, and it's not necessarily his fault. I don't know where he. Apparently, he's from New York City. New York City public schools went through a difficult time, but we're not talking about his lack of intelligence. We're going to talk instead of his wife's, and not even so much about her lack of intelligence, but how people like that are able to take advantage of other people who decide that what they want is to not be woke. They don't want diversity. They don't want to have these conversations. They want homogeneity. They want to live in a space where, quite frankly, they don't have to question things. They don't have to worry about things. They don't have to account for things. And they want to stay as stupid as their grandparents were. It's not me. I'm not saying, I am saying it, but I'm not saying it. Now, in the article or in the podcast episode, you're going to get a chance to hear this article. Actually, Jonah, do we have time to play it now? Can we play this, the article looking at what was happening not the article, the clip of what was happening in Florida? Do we have time? Okay. The CBS, yes. So let's pull up the CBS article. I want you all to take a listen to this video clip. And this is a clip of a CBS investigation that is essentially looking at what was happening in the state of Florida with Byron Donalds' wife. Now, Byron Donalds' wife is in charge of a charter school system. She's actually one of the faces of charter school expansion right now in the Republican Party. And, Republicans are very excited about charter schools. One of the reasons they're excited about charter schools is that charter schools allow you to not have a lot of oversight. Not a whole lot of people can ask a lot of questions about what's happening in your charter school. And because of that, it creates a situation where, frankly, you can be dumb as rocks and still qualify as an education space. And so I want you all to take a listen to this video clip. Actually, hold on. Let me get it up because I want to share my screen so that people can see it. Let's get it together. Hold on. Y'all know YouTube and Zoom don't be sharing as much as I need them to share. So hold on. Let me get this up. Jonah, I know you got the clip ready. I just want to make sure people can see it so they don't think I be, hyperbolicizing on the back end. All right. Y'all can see the screen. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and let's refresh this. Hold on. All right, Jonah, let's hit it now.
We've noticed the growing popularity of classical charter schools. They're funded by taxpayers and often tout a more traditional curriculum than regular public schools. But a CBS News investigation found there is limited oversight of these schools, including their finances. Here's Mark Strassman.
For second grade, Brianna Hatley's daughter Bella planned to switch from public school to a new charter school in Fort Myers. It was called the Optima Classical Academy.
I wanted to find an alternative, so I was really excited. Everybody was excited about it.
But in May of 2024, parents received this email. Optima would not open as planned. It cited economic challenges and lingering instability from Hurricane Ian. Inside this building, there are no teachers, no students, no learning. It's a ghost building.
I was frustrated. I was disappointed. I was upset.
Optima's chief executive is Erica Donalds, wife of Florida Congressman Byron Donalds.
I knew there were so many families out there that were desperate for this option.
Before launching the school in Fort Myers, she had opened 4 others in Florida. Our CBS News investigation looked into the tax filings for those 4 Optima-run schools. Between 2020 and 2023, they paid roughly 30% of the government funding they received, totaling about $35 million to outside firms that Optima said offered good prices on payroll, IT, and other back-office services. It was eventually disclosed Erica Donalds held a stake in 2 of those firms, each worth at least $1 million.
It is absolutely problematic, but it is not atypical.
For this industry?
For this industry, no.
Professor Bruce Baker studies charter schools at the University of Miami. He told us nationally charter schools are required to provide far fewer details about how they spend taxpayer money than traditional public schools.
It's not easy at all to follow the money.
So is there any accountability?
Presumptively, the accountability is on how well they do for students.
Erica Donalds declined an interview. In a statement, a spokesperson said she is an accomplished businesswoman with a strong record of starting successful charter schools and providing thousands of students with an excellent education. Donalds is no longer involved with any of those original Optima schools. Brianna Hatley tried again this year to enroll Bella at the new Optima school in Fort Myers, but it never opened. And while that school never collected any public money, Hatley says she still feels burned.
These are our kids. They're our world. So if you're going to have a school, if you're going to offer services, then offer them. If you're not, then just leave us alone.
Here on Florida's Gulf Coast, the Optima building has been sold to another charter operator.
Wow.
For Eye in America, I'm Mark Strassman in Fort Myers, Florida.
Oh gosh, that's terrible. That's a shame. Isn't it curious how the people who be preaching the most are connected to the people who be the most crooked? Now, I don't know anything about Erica Donalds. I do know that she is now being investigated as you can see from the conversation that they were having there in the clip, because of her involvement with the payments that were being made to the charter school network. Now, I will say that at a certain period of time, my own child attended a charter school. This is not about charter schools generally, but this charter school in particular is one that focuses on Eurocentric education. They don't want to be woke. They don't want to know nothing about the wokeness. They want to be focused on European classics because that to them is a sign of intelligence. So intelligent, however, that the school could not even open. And what was interesting there is that you had this professor at the University of Miami who was talking about the fact that the only measure that we often have for charter schools is how well they're doing for students. Oddly enough, we also find out that as you read in the article, students at these 4 Optima schools performed below average when you're looking at math and reading scores. Professor Baker said the following, quote, "Florida's charter sector is not strong, and Optima schools, at least the 4 schools that seem to be in that affiliated mix, perform even less well." Now, this is not a surprise for anyone who's been studying Florida for any length of time. We have talked about how Florida, they were some of the first to ban books from their libraries. They were some of the first to say that you could go to jail if you were an educator who was talking about information that was related to wokeness or to libraries or to book bans. And so we have seen that Florida has been sort of ground zero for stupidity. And we know this because we even saw examples of how they worked feverishly to prevent the rollout of the AP history course that was going to focus on African American history. And what did they do? They went to churches in black communities and told the churches in black communities, well, we certainly don't want this curriculum to be rolled out because did you know the curriculum also includes a section on the black gays? And who knows what your your child is going to be taught when they're learning about black gay people. Now, aside from the fact that black gay people exist, they're a part of our community, the fact is they were very successful at targeting black religious communities and enlisting the support of black religious communities to prevent the rollout of an AP history course that would have provided a significant amount of information to fill in the gaps that were otherwise left by Florida's mediocre, dare I say, paltry education system. And of course, we know that Florida does not rank extraordinarily high when it comes to test scores, and that's fine if that's what you like, if you like that sort of thing. But it feels as though there are people who benefit from stupidity. Is you stupid? Is you racist? Or is you both? Then we learn, or we're reminded by the National Literacy Institute earlier this week, that over 54% of Americans, approximately 130 million people, cannot read beyond and comprehend beyond a sixth grade level. Now, that is always a bit of an asterisk point for me, because are we talking about sixth graders who are being taught at independent schools like on the Upper West Side where the rich and the wealthy live? Or are we talking about sixth graders who are going to underfunded schools in Brownsville, East New York, where children are going to schools that are at risk of being shut down from the time they're in kindergarten to the time they graduate college? And when we look at the National Institute of Literacy, one of the things we also learn is that if 54% of adults read below the equivalent of a sixth grade level, and I'm willing to believe it's the sixth graders in the underfunded schools in the East New York community that is that comparison point, not the schools that are well supplied and well funded in Upper West Side, what we also learn is that 64% of our country's fourth graders don't read proficiently at all. When you add to that the fact that artificial intelligence and the studies out of a number of very well-respected institutions have determined that when you scroll for your pastime, when you don't allow yourself to be bored, when you don't allow yourself to cultivate the ability to sit for 10 minutes without something to look at, something to do, and you get antsy, when they measure your levels of intelligence, we find that Americans are growing increasingly more stupid because we no longer have the attention span to deal with meaty material. I actually had a listener who was on the YouTube page. Shout out to them. I don't know them, but they basically said, I really want to support you, but 30 minutes is just so long. And I was like, oh, you don't want restaurant education and information. You want corner store snack bites. You want the hot Cheetos version of information. I was like, this is not TikTok. This is probably not the space for you. You might want to find another YouTuber who's going to give you information in a way that's sort of snack bitey, because sitting with lengthy conversation is disturbing for you. And that is really, and it's not that person's fault. I don't know this person, but that's really indicative of the fact that if you can't sit for 20 minutes to hear 4 different angles of a story brought together in a way that's sort of presented to you to elevate your intelligence, what does that say about our levels of stupidity and our gravitation towards it? Now, this matters for a whole host of reasons, because Kristi Noem and Tom Homan, who are in charge of ICE, who are in charge of the Department of Homeland Security, have now basically been coming under fire because the people they're hiring are dumb. The people they are hiring are not cognitively capable. The people that they are hiring are not physically capable. I know P. His own mama said he's trash and possibly a war criminal, definitely, possibly, allegedly a murderer, except I know that he has said he didn't want people who were out of weight or out of shape as a part of the military. And then we began seeing that there were several notices dismissing people from the military who did not meet the weight requirements and the health requirements, even though P. His own mama said he's trash, except can't do push-ups. He can't do pull-ups. He can't do chin-ups. There's a lot of things that he cannot do. But we're in a situation now where we're getting reports that, quote, Kristi Noem and Tom Homan are not hiring the best and the brightest for the new ICE Army. The reports, according to the Daily Mail, say that total novices are being fast-tracked into the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia, where instructors have been left astounded at the levels of incompetence. According to the article, quote, we have people failing open book tests, and we have folks that can barely read or write English, said one Department of Homeland Security official. We even had now this one is a little bit of body shaming, but the idea is that if you're in the military, you're supposed to have a certain physique. And they said that we even had a 469-pound man sent to the academy whose own doctor certified him not at all fit for any physical activity. Insiders say the vetting process has been so rushed that officials didn't even wait for drug test results to come back before hiring recruits and flying them off to Georgia, only to discover afterwards that the test came back positive. So we're not dealing with our best. We're not dealing with the brightest. And when you look at the fact that many people in our law enforcement agency, and this is not to say that if you in ICE, you stupid. It's just to say that if you are in ICE, the chances of you being stupid are probably higher than if you were in, say, an educated institution. I'm just saying that's what the report said. And so when we think about the fact that many people in our police departments don't have to have college degrees, not saying that college means that you're smart, but sitting in a college classroom forces you to wrestle with material. Unless you're Samantha Fulnecki, who apparently is this week's WEI of the week, because that's the girl who wrote an essay that was more of a Facebook post, and now she's getting awards, she's getting applause. She probably would be a good candidate for ICE. I'm just saying. And she's also a pre-med major, which is very, very scary. But this is a challenge because when you have a society largely occupied by uneducated people who are then given access to weapons, well, that's a problem. That's a real problem. And when these uneducated people live in silos and in communities where they don't have access to other people, it reminded me of the Pew Research that came out a couple years ago that basically said 75% of white people live in all white communities. Which means that, yep, is you stupid or is you racist or is you both? Because the data's not looking so great. Now, I can say this with a bit of a tongue-in-cheek approach because I descend from an ancestors who created libraries. I descend from ancestors in places like Timbuktu where the currency was books, right? That's what our ancestors created, math and science. An African could never. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, if you're descendants from such intelligent people, why are y'all so stupid now? Well, look where we live. Look what the education system that we go to. We go to y'all's education system, which y'all created for y'all. There's a lot of reasons for why we are not performing academically as well as we should as a culture within a culture. But what's your excuse? What's your excuse? Now, this also matters because we have seen all of these attacks against colleges and universities, and Donald Trump had recently implemented, as you all know, this ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which also targets gender. And what we are now learning is that this anti-woke agenda, this don't be woke, stay asleep, stay as sleepy Donald Trump, who again cannot stay awake through a press conference, a meeting, a conversation. He can't even stay awake when he the one talking. That's how sleepy that man is. But what we're now learning is that this ban against diversity, equity, and inclusion, which also includes gender, which basically takes the American student population and then determines who's going to get access to college. What we have learned is that because y'all are so stupid in your schools and you prioritize lack of education or the type of education that's going to allow a Samantha Fulnecki to become a third-year college student who cannot write an essay, cannot cite to anything beyond her own opinion. She quoted the Bible but didn't even quote the Bible. She just went off of her own memory of Bible verses, which unfortunately a lot of people in that faith tend to do. When that's your educational high mark, and then you're going to reward her and appraise her, then it makes all the rest of this make sense. But what we're learning is that this ban against diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to really hurt the uneducated a lot. And by that, I mean white boys. It's the white boys. According to this report in the Washington Post, the Trump administration's ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion also targets gender. The ban may impact gender balancing practices that often benefit college men. I was not aware as to the levels of which colleges and universities are basically giving white boys an alley-oop into college when they don't actually meritoriously deserve it. The article goes on to say Brown University, one of the most selective institutions in America, attracted nearly 50,000 applicants who vied for just 1,700 freshman seats last year. The university accepted nearly equal numbers of male and female prospects, though, like some other schools, it got nearly twice as many female applicants. That math meant it was easier for male students to get in. 7% of male applicants were admitted compared to 4.4% of female applicants. Now, the article goes on to say that the Trump administration's policies are basically going to end this practice where men, namely white boys at colleges, get access to additional points, thumbs on the scale. And now that we're looking at what the ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion look like, we're learning that white males, who are some of the largest beneficiaries of this type of diversity, equity, and inclusion, are going to be the ones facing the biggest problems. According to Ted Mitchell, who is the president of the American Council on Education, also known as ACE, he says this drips with irony. The idea of males, including white males, being at the short end of the stick all of a sudden would be a truly ironic outcome. And he says that now that colleges and universities, as a result of Donald Trump's ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're also going to have to end consideration of gender in admissions. That basically means that the white boys are going to come out at the short end of the stick because they're not the brightest. And they're not applying to schools in ways that demonstrate their merit. The article says, for years, universities and colleges have been trying to keep the number of men and women on campuses evened out at a time when a growing number of men has been choosing not to go to college. Some schools have tried to attract more men by adding football and other sports, promoting forestry and hunting programs, because nothing says man like football and hunting and sports and forests. Men, testosterone, balls, penises, that. Nationwide, the number of women on campuses have surpassed the number of men for more than 4 decades, with nearly 40% more women than men enrolled in higher education. So when we remember that the Donald Trump administration has put a ban on or a limit on the amount of money you could request to attend school, when we remember that they have now determined that a whole host of the professions that are more participated in by women, when they put ban on those being considered professional degrees so that you can't afford to go to college, it's also because the men aren't doing it, namely the white men. Efforts to admit applicants at higher rates based on gender are legal under a loophole in federal anti-discrimination law, one that's used to keep the genders balanced on campus. But the Trump administration has consistently included gender among the characteristics it says it does not want schools to consider for admissions or hiring, along with race, ethnicity, nationality, political views, sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious associations. Now, the article goes on to say that Sean Harper, who is the founder and chief research scientist at the University of Southern California's Race and Equity Center, he says that, quote, the racial parts have gotten a lot more attention, but I know from having spoken with practitioners who work in college admissions, they have read very clearly that it says race and gender in the administration's pronouncements about ending preferences in admission. What I think they don't understand is that taking away the ability of colleges and universities to balance the gender composition of their incoming classes will ultimately have an impact on the college enrollment rates of white males. It's likely to impact them the most, as a matter of fact. Now, what's interesting about this is that y'all remember that phrase I keep using? The hole you dig for me is the hole you, or the jail you built for me is the one you're gonna rot in. That was a Sealy curse out of Color Purple, or the Caribbean phrase, you dig a hole for me, you better dig two, because the hole the jail, the harm that you plan for me is coming at you. This is one of the ultimate examples of that. We have learned that your willingness or your participation in the racism has a lot to do with lacking intelligence, because the more you know about things, the more curious you are about things, then the more you're going to explore, you're going to read, you're going to discover that Europeans did not discover a land that was fully occupied. You're going to learn that, well, Europeans were in the caves of their dark ages, with a literacy rate of less than 2%. Africans were exploring, they were building, they were navigating. We're in our dark ages now, and our dark ages got a lot to do with us being infected by y'all, but we ain't never had no dark ages. Y'all was in caves, baby. Y'all was doing the cannibalizing. Y'all didn't have no soap. You didn't have no washcloths, which again, culturally is something that you continue to struggle with. And so we now can recognize that when we had people like Imhotep, when we had people who were like military strategists and literary strategists, and then the first surgeries are being performed in Africa, and when we learned that the first counting tools that we have record of are found in Africa, when we learned that there was black women who are most likely some of the ones who invented numbers because they were counting their cycles in accordance with the moon, when we learn all of these things, and then we look at the fact that we come from a legacy where when y'all invaded Africa, y'all was burning libraries, y'all was burning books, y'all banned people from learning how to read, and the only way you were able to maintain slavery was to threaten us with death if we did the very natural African thing of learning. My God, is you racist or is you just stupid? Maybe both. Maybe both. But now I think this has given us a lot of food for thought. We cannot trust. Well, we've had plenty of reason to learn that we cannot trust that having our children educated alongside those who, quite frankly, can't see our humanity out beyond the pressures of their own racism, when that's the people that we're living with, and we as the blacks or the people of color have trust them to educate our children, well, then we realize that, first of all, when we were doing prior to integration, one of the things that I have loved reading about is the stories of people who talk about how before integration, when you were being educated by black people who lived in your black community, who loved your black ass, one of the things that was happening was we were sending massive amounts of people who had the preparation to go to college, even if they didn't have the ability to, because colleges that were accepting black people were few and far in between. We remind ourselves that diversity, equity, inclusion was not about us. It was about them. It was about convincing enough white people to stop being so racist, to block us from competing. And as soon as that happened, when we began to compete, we excel, because that's what we do. That's who we are. It's our DNA. And as a recessive gene, others may not know that, but for us, it is who we are. It is a part of our DNA. And we have learned that in every single arena, when we get an opportunity to compete, we excel. We just do. And now that they have decided that us getting access to higher education is a problem. And they have decided that they no longer want to allow the women's to get educated in these professions. They no longer want to allow the blacks to have access to education. And they said it was because we didn't have the merit. And then they went to court and they filed lawsuits to get rid of race in consideration for colleges. And then what happened? Our numbers went higher in some places and stayed the same at others. We needed diversity, equity, and inclusion because the stupidity of your racism was blocking you from having people who could take your companies higher, who could take your institutions to high places you could never even imagine. We needed diversity, equity, and inclusion to hack the stupidity of your own racism, of your own brains. And now that we're in a society where they have decided to do everything in terms of burning down our access, they're actually ending up in a situation where it's the white boys who are going to be the ones most at risk. So again, the question I have on this Friday is you really racist? Or is he just stupid? Maybe it's a little bit of both. But what this means for us, as Dr. Wendy Williams said when she was on these airways a couple of weeks ago, we could build freedom schools under a tree. Block us from every college, block us from every school, block us from every institution. Do what you must, do what's going to make your dumb, uneducated hearts feel better. We are in a situation where you just let go over 500,000 of the smartest, most educated people in the entire country. Said, we don't need you anymore. You're black and we don't want you here, which means you've just given the smartest and most educated people in the country a whole lot of free time. Imagine what the descendants of those who created libraries, architecture, literature, science, and math, imagine what we could do with all of this time. And that's the energy I want us to take into the rest of this year. That's the energy I want us to take definitely into this weekend. Their stupidity should not be a measurement comparison for us. Their willful embrace of of being uneducated, that's for them. Let them own that. We, the excellent, we, the brilliant, we, the grandparents of the planet, have a different approach, a different calling, a different anointing on our lives, if you will. Shout out to Dr. Damas from yesterday. We can build schools for our babies anywhere. And now we have a whole lot of people who've got time to do it. And I just think that we should take this information, we should employ it, we should consider it, we should remind ourselves that we are the first, which means that while we might be in our dark ages now, the sun does shine in the morning and it does rise once again. So as the pendulum continues to swing and as we continue to learn about all the fallout of this administration and the way that they move, the way that they don't move, the way that they understand things, the way that they just sort of break things because they don't have a lot of understanding, be encouraged because the hole they dug for us is the one they gonna rot in. Urban View will be right back on the other side of this commercial break. YouTube, as always, appreciate y'all. Please like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to pay attention and be on the lookout for Lurie Breaks It Down, the podcast episode, which will be out later on this afternoon, wherever you get your podcasts.